All right, I'm gonna use this mic because I don't feel like fighting with that one. All right, so I've been doing it for a few years now, doing kind of like the sermons for the kids, and then Pastor Taylor, the first year that I did it was like, well, why don't you take the sermon that you're doing there and obviously make it more, adult, and bring it to the Sunday service, because there I only have like probably 3 to 5 minutes tops, and then the kids are like butterflies, and they're completely not even listening to a word I say anymore. So I literally get up there and I'm like, this is what I got to say, guys, blah, and then I'm done, and then I'm out. So it's exciting to be a part of that, but it's also awesome to be in front of you guys and kind of giving you basically what I've been kind of learning and what I've been kind of going through. And for me this year, a lot of what I've been kind of working through and understanding is love, and the full extent of love and what it means to love. And I figured that'd be a great topic for the kids as well, especially the world has plenty of hate as it is. There's so much hate everywhere for different people, different kinds of people, different groups of people, and it's so easy to find hate everywhere that I think we don't really know what love truly is anymore, or what effect it can have. Just that aspect of loving somebody, the difference it can make in their lives. And so that was the topic I wanted to talk about. But there's a specific verse that kind of goes with it, and it's in John chapter 13, verses 31 to 35. It's kind of a short one, but giving some of the kind of context as to what's happening. This is the Last Supper. This is when Jesus is getting ready to have Judas come in and betray him, and then he obviously going to go through the steps till he makes it to this crucifixion. And so he knows that his time is coming to an end. And in that moment, he's got to give the best advice he can give. The number one thing he wants his disciples to walk away with. Now is his time to tell him it, because he's running out of time, and he wants his guys to understand something very specific. And I think it's interesting what he talks to them about here. The first thing that he kind of starts off with. So after he had told Judas to go do what he needed to do, now he's down to just, he's one less guy, but he knows why. And here we are in verse 31. When therefore he had gone out, Judas had now just left, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him immediately. Little children, I am with you a little while longer." He's telling them, my time is coming to an end, guys. This has been fun. I really enjoyed this. I love you guys. But I've got something major that I have to do. You shall seek me, and as I had said to the Jews, now I say to you also, where I am going, you cannot come. I'm leaving. My time is short. And where I'm going, you guys can't come with me. We've been together for a while, but this is the end of the line. I'm going to have to go, and you guys can't come with me this time. And then here's where he tells them, because he's basically bringing forth, like, I'm telling you that I'm not going to be here for a while. I'm not going to be here for much longer, because I have something very important I want you to take away. So he says, a new commandment I give to you. And so they're thinking, a new commandment? This is going to be huge. And then he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. So at first, on the surface, it's just kind of like, we know that. The disciples knew that. That's Old Testament stuff. That's stuff that they've been hearing forever. But there's an addition to it that I think is phenomenal. So he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. You must also love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And that's kind of that last part was the verse that I tried to get the kids to memorize. I'd always say, by this one thing, and then this one thing, and I'd say, they will know you're my followers. They will know you're my followers. Because disciples is kind of a word that, how many 5-year-olds know what disciples are? So followers, that's an easy one. So they will know you're my followers if you love one another. And then I kind of explained that at that moment, the disciples start thinking, what does Jesus mean, even as I have loved? So they start thinking back of all these stories that they've been with Jesus for 3 years now, watch his ministry, watch his miracles, watch him do amazing things for people. And so they start thinking of all these stories. And the first night I talked about Matthew. was a tax collector. And if you know anything about the tax collectors in that time, I mean, you know it's bad when it's tax collectors and sinners. So you're not just a sinner, you have a separate category. So that's how bad the tax collectors were considered. And here's Matthew, the tax collector, and Jesus approaches him and says, come with me. And Matthew's like, wow, okay. And then next thing you know, he's following him around. He's watching him do this amazing ministry. And never once did Jesus criticize him or attack him for what he was doing or show hate towards him for what he had done. Instead, he showed him there's a better way to do things. There's a better life. There's more to life than just collecting taxes from people and skimming a little off the top for yourself. So that's the first night I start off with that. And that was really the basis for what I wanted to talk about. The basis of what love was Jesus was that pure love. And so I like to break it down into acronyms because it's easier for me. So I break down a word into an acronym, and then every day we touch one of the letters. It's just easier for me. So the first night wasn't really any letters. It was just kind of the introduction. We talked about Matthew. And then the acronym was love. So the first letter was L. And I thought, what better story than the least of these? That scenario where Jesus is now trying to explain to his disciples exactly what the judgment is going to be like and what the basis for that judgment is going to be when they stand before God and have to atone for the life that they've lived. And so he uses kind of not necessarily an analogy, but he talks about, God as a king and kind of explains it like, king, when you stand before the king, here is what is going to happen. And he, sorry, and he says, the king will look to his one side, and to that group of people, he will say, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked and cold, you gave me clothes. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was in bondage in prison, you visited me. And of course, the people will look at him and say, wow, when did we do? I don't remember seeing you naked, thirsty, hungry. I don't remember seeing you any of those times doing that, or being hungry, or needing a place to stay, and I let you in. I don't remember that. And then the king says to them, truly I say to you, what you have done for the least of these, meaning the people who needed the help, you have also done for me. And I think it's interesting then in that moment when he's talking about, standing before the king in judgment, there's no mention of sacrificing animals. Did you sacrifice the appropriate amount of animals before me? There's no talk of dietary restrictions. Did you have bacon? Because if you had bacon, bye-bye. There's no mention of that either. When Jesus explained this, those things fall to the wayside. Instead, he, and he doesn't bring up, obviously, but he doesn't bring up politics as well. There's no clause in here did you vote Republican? Did you vote Democrat? Are you an independent? That's not in there. Instead, the thing he's saying is, did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe those who needed it? Did you give water to those who were thirsty? Did you offer your home as a place to stay for those who needed a place to stay? When people were in trouble and needed somebody to just be there for them, were you there for them? Did you visit them when they needed you the most? That's the criteria he's going by. That's the standards he's looking at. And I thought that was an amazing point to bring up. Also, I'm kind of staying in Matthew for the whole thing, so that the least of these, that story is in Matthew 25, verses 31 to 46. I added more. It's really kind of like the last little bit, but I added more to kind of give the context, because I don't want to take any of this stuff out of context. But he's explaining, the judgment that's going to happen when you go before God, and he explains it as the king and the least of these. But also in Matthew, chapter 5, verses 23 and 24, there's actually, he's talking about going before, when you're going to give an offering to God, but in your mind that there is trouble between you and a brother or sister. He literally says, drop your offering and walk away and go be reconciled to that individual. Because it's more important that those things get settled first, then come back and make your offering. It's important that you are reconciled to your brothers. And so whatever issues you guys are having, find a way to come to a compromise, find a solution, work it out. Don't approach me and try to give an offering while you're hating your brother or sister for something. go fix that problem first. And I think it's really important to understand that you need to be, oh, thank you, it's my wife. She knows things, she knows I need things before I know I need them, right? What? I told you I didn't need it, she just went and got it, so, I mean, I don't know. And then, so that was the least of these, the L for love. Next would obviously be the O, and I thought of like others first, putting others first. I know that sounds very similar to the least of these, but I think it's important that not only just people who need your help, but even those who don't think they need your help. Do you know what I'm saying? The guy or girl that they got everything, they don't need your help, but you know that they do. Kind of like me when I didn't need the water, but Katie was like, I'm gonna go get it anyway, because he does need it, he just doesn't know it yet. She's helping me segue here. All right, so that story takes place in Matthew, oh, I didn't put the chapter down. But that's also in Matthew. They're on their way to, they're traveling to Jerusalem. And he's explaining that, it's going to be the end of the road for him. And he's kind of trying to explain to them, like, we've been together for a while, we've done some awesome things together, but it's coming to an end. Like, when we get to Jerusalem, things are going to get pretty crazy pretty fast, and before you know it, I'm not going to be there anymore. And he's trying to explain it to them, and then they continue walking, and he hears grumbling behind him, like, and he's like, what are they talking about? And then he gets approached, and basically the question is, all right, okay, you're leaving, you're going, okay, what? Which of us is the best? Which of us is the best, the greatest? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's 12 of us, and then there's a bunch of others following, but which one of us is your right-hand man? Come on, which one? And Jesus is like, are you serious? Did you not hear anything I just said? Like, that's what you're worried about? Your teacher is going to die for you, and you're worried about which one of you is the greatest. So he's like, all right, we need to handle this right now. So kind of pulls him to the side of the road, and he's like, all right, sit down. We're going to handle this right now. This has to be hashed out. So he explains to them that if he talks about the rulers that they already know. He's like, about the Gentile rulers and how they use their power and their authority and their influence for their own benefit. And they're all like, yeah, we know. We've been victims of that for our entire lives, our parents, their entire lives. Everyone we know has been a victim to the people in authority using their authority to their own advantage. And then Jesus hits them with, not so with you. That's not how it's going to be with you guys. We're doing things completely upside down, completely backwards from what you've ever heard. Instead, you're going to use your power and influence for everyone else. If you want to be the greatest, you must be the least. If you want to be the first, you got to be the last. If you want to be the leader, you got to be the servant to everyone. And then he even hits them with, I myself did not come here to be glorified other than to serve all of you. And of course he's talking about his crucifixion. But again, right now, the disciples, they're just not getting it. They've seen him do these things. They've seen him do these amazing miracles. They've seen him work in people's lives in dramatic, crazy ways. But they're still not getting it. So that was the others first. So that's the O. And we're going to fly over to the V. Now this one I really love. V, value. Now this one I like because I, kind of a personal note, I have I had a very hard relationship with my family growing up, specifically one of my parents who wasn't around a lot, and so I always struggled with feeling valued. It was something that I just didn't think I was. When your own parents just don't have time for you, you just kind of feel like they're the ones that are supposed to love me no matter what's happening, and it doesn't seem like they have time for me, so maybe I'm not worth it. And so I kind of struggled with value. So for me, it's actually a cool story. It's a very quick story. It's in Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 to 22. It's only 2 verses long in Matthew's gospel. But the interesting point is, this story appears in 3 of the 4 gospels. And it's a short encounter, but 3 of the 4 gospels are counted. And it's a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. And because of it, it's a medical condition. She's been bleeding for 12 years. She's gone to doctors and and physicians and everyone she could think of to try and get healing, and she couldn't. And then because she couldn't get healed, there's obviously people who are spreading rumors that there's obviously something she did, so God is punishing her. All these rumors start spreading, and she gets separated. She's not part of the community anymore. They ostracize her, they push her to the side, and she's on her own. And so we have this woman who's been on her own, desperately trying to figure out what's wrong, wanting to be included, but feeling devalued because nobody's including her. They want her off to the side because they don't understand her, and they think she did something wrong to get this. Because that was the mindset then, is if you're suffering in some manner, it's because God is punishing you for a sin that you've done. And so we have this situation where she hears that Jesus is coming through, and she thinks to herself, if I can just get close enough to touch any part of him, his robe, anything, if I could just touch it, I'm sure I'll be healed. I'm sure I'll be healed. And so she goes to where she hears Jesus is going to be. And I mean, it was pretty easy to find. There's a massive crowd of people who are all trying to touch Jesus, all trying to ask him questions and get his opinions and advice on things. I mean, he was a big deal. And so she sees this crowd, and she gets through. She works her way through the crowd. Nobody's really paying attention to her, which she's used to because that's her whole life, right? Nobody's paid attention to her. So she's weaving her way through the crowd to get to him. And she finally gets close enough to touch his robe. And when she does, instantly she's healed, just like she knew she would. But that's not the end of the story. And that's the part, I think we all kind of skim over what Jesus says to her, the first part of what Jesus says to her, to get to the part where your faith has made you well. That's the one everyone talks about, your faith has made you well. You trusted in me, and now you're well. But there's a very important part in the very beginning that I want to touch on. So I'm gonna kind of read starting at verse 20. And the woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garments, because she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will get well. But Jesus, turning and seeing her, said, daughter, take courage. Your faith has made you well. Now, that to me speaks volumes about what Jesus was doing. He wasn't into half healing. He didn't just heal her physically. He reminded her that she has value. He looked at her and said, daughter, your faith has made you well. He restored her value, made her feel like a person again. And I think that's exactly what she needed to hear in that moment. And we also hear, you can imagine that the woman who's been through all this, devalued for years. I mean, you can imagine the kind of impact that had for her, having somebody of his stature, known for how well he can speak, known for his vast knowledge, look at her and say, daughter. But another part of it is, he turns, in Mark's account, he turns and he says, who touched me? And of course, the disciples are kind of looking around like, are you serious? There's like 1 million people here, and everyone's trying to touch you. Take your pick. If you point, one of them probably touched you. But there's just something in the way she touched that Jesus knew it was a touch of desperation. It wasn't completely self-centered. It wasn't just because. There was something very sincere in the way she was trying to approach him. And I think that's why he honed in on her and said, no. There was somebody specific who touched me, who needs me to say something into their life right now to change everything. So what's the effect of all this? That's the E, is the effect of what love can do. And so we're back in John for that one, because we're finishing out back in John, where, after he's done giving his spiel about, you need to love one another as I have loved you. The disciples are still not getting it. You know what I mean? They're just, especially because what's the next thing Peter says, if you know the story? After Jesus gives this whole commandment about loving one another as I have loved you, Peter's like, where are you going? It's like, Peter, did you hear anything I just said? And then they go this back and forth about, no, wherever you go, I'm coming with you. I'm going to go. And Jesus is like, you can't. You can't. That's why I need you to understand what I'm saying. And so we see that happening, that kind of back and forth. But later on in John, we see, after all these times they thought of, all these stories, all these things that they've lived through with Jesus, they're just not getting it. They're not prepared for the full display of Jesus' love that's about to unfold. And actually, later on in John, Jesus even says this. There is no he repeats his commandment, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And then he says, my commandment is that you love one another. And he says, there is no greater love than this, that a man would lay down his life for that of his friends. And they're like, okay, I guess that makes sense. If you're willing to die for somebody, obviously you love them. But they still didn't get it, right? Then there's that moment on the cross. And in that moment, 3 years of ministry, thousands of years of preparation, and an eternity of love all meet and collide in a display of pure love as Jesus reached out to the least of us and helped us with something we could never do ourselves. That's our salvation. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. He's thinking of others. While he's up there suffering and he could save himself, he says, no. I'm going to put you guys first. I'm going to put you guys first. That's that reconciliation. Upon claiming it is finished, he restored our value by stating, you guys are worth going all the way to the end for. You guys here, now. It wasn't just them there, us here now. Our kids, their kids. Future generations, all the way until when Jesus comes back and we're with him for eternity. Up until that point, every single person, Jesus sat up there and said, you're worth going all the way to the end no matter what it takes. That's completion. And when the disciples finally saw that, there's a moment, I feel, where it clicked in their minds. And what happened created a movement of people who, they were radicalized. And they were radicalized to show and talk of a love that nobody understood. A love that this world cannot understand. Dictionaries, no matter how hard they try, will never be able to define it. A love that, no matter how hard life or the world or the people in it try to, it's a love that cannot be put out. A love that humanity will never be able to put out, and a love that our hearts desperately need. A love that Jesus claimed would be the defining feature of his followers when he said, by this all men will know you're my disciples if you love one another. If you love one another. What amazing things could our church do if we got that one thing 100% right? The impact we could have in our community, globally, the impact we can have in people's lives if we got that one thing right. What could we do as a church? I mean, that kind of love changed the world once. It absolutely revolutionized how people thought about everything. I mean, if you read the history of Christianity and the persecution they suffered, but at the end, the change that came from it, it's undeniable. It's undeniable that change happened around the world for different groups of people who may not have agreed on anything else, but they came together in the love of Christ. What if you, as a disciple, what if I, as a disciple of Christ, could get this one thing right? What kind of change could we bring about in our own lives and those around us? So let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before your throne this morning, just excited that the week is over. It's very exhausting. It's very tiring. But also just so happy that we're able to be a part of something so powerful, Lord. I pray that those kids would leave with just a longing to know more of you, Lord, and wanting to be closer to you and understand you deeper, Lord. Thank you for the staff and their willingness to give up every night to be able to make sure that those kids had a place that they could go feel safe, play some amazing sports, and hear about who you are, Lord. Thank you for this church, for being able to set that up, Lord, and sending us out there to do that, and the opportunity that we have to just Be a conduit for your love, Lord. A love that we will never understand until we're fully in your presence, Lord. A love that this world can't define. And a love that revolutionizes and changes everything we understand, Lord. We pray these things through your holy name. Amen.